Thank you to everyone and welcome to our Research Connect series this afternoon. My name is Jorge Castillo. I'm a CDTRP trainee since last year, 2022, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. And I myself am a graduate student at the Lunenfeld Tannenbaum Research Institute in Toronto in the laboratory of Dr. Ian Rogers. And my research focuses on maintaining a mouse kidney alive outside of the organism with the hope of the developing a disease model. And first, before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that the CDTRP is hosted by the University of Alberta, which is located on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, the Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dean, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose territories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. I encourage you to write your land acknowledgement in the chat box if you wish. And we would also like to acknowledge Astellas, Takeda, and AstraZeneca, without whose generous support we could not host these sessions. And CDTRP also relies on the help of our community. Your gift ensures that we can focus on delivering our mission of supporting excellence in donation and transplantation research. There will be a link in the chat box for those who are interested as well. And before we dive into the main content of today's session, I will pass it over to Erica for some general CDTRP updates.
Hi, so thank you, Jorge. I have one announcement today, and it's going to be a save the date for a PFD forum. So this year's PFD forum, Patient, Family, and Donor Research Forum, will be held virtually on June 8th and 9th. Registration is free, and it can be done through our website. The link to register will be shared in the chat, and if you have any questions on this matter, please feel free to email myself or Manuel for more information. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Erica. So before I introduce our speaker this afternoon, I have a few housekeeping notes. Today's session is recorded and posted on the CDTRP website and YouTube channel. During the presentation, we encourage you to keep your cameras on, but we kindly request that you keep your mics off. And if you have any question or comment, you can raise your hand with the raise hand button on Zoom. And I'm pleased to introduce our presenter, Amina Silva. Amina Silva is a registered nurse and is in her last year of her PhD at Queen's University. Her clinical background is focused on end-of-life care, kidney transplantation, and eye donation processes. Her research program is focused on organ donation processes, end-of-life and survivorship care, and simulation-based educational strategies. Amina is also a research coordinator for the BRIC program, which studies burnout and compassion fatigue among organ and tissue donation coordinators in Canada. She's also a research assistant at Queen's University and a simulation facilitator at the University of Ottawa. And we're all very excited about your presentation, and I'll hand it to you now.
Okay, perfect. So can you guys see my screen and hear me just fine?
Yes. Yep, that's perfect.
Perfect. So today I'm going to be presenting actually on behalf of Vanessa Silva on the topic in developing a national research program, and that's a collaborative approach. And just to start with a very quickly introduction, so as we all know, healthcare research plays a critical role in understanding complex healthcare issues, as well as improving outcomes for patients, healthcare system, and reducing costs for the system as well. However, creating and managing a national or even a large-scale research program involves a multifaceted and complex process that requires a lot of planning, effective project management, and strong collaboration among stakeholders and participants in the research. So here in that project, I will speak a lot about a national research project because that was the experience we had. But pretty much all the steps and process I'm going to state here today can be used to any large scale research as well. So I will be today sharing a lot of our experience with the BRIC program. And even though he just stated the name of the research program, but just to give you guys a very quick background, because I will use a couple of practical examples. So the BRIC research program aims to investigate and intervene among work-related issues among organ and tissue donation coordinators in Canada, mostly compassion fatigue, burnout, and moral distress. And so even though we are sharing our experience here today, it is important to understand that every research is unique. So there is no single formula that we can show for you guys and you can just apply to your research, but we truly hope that by sharing our experience that can help you in elaborating your own research as well. And just as a very quick introduction, so that's what we call a core research team that has been involved since the beginning of that project. So Vanessa Silva is the PI of the project. I'm currently the research coordinator. Ken and Lee, Ken is the project manager and Lee is the educational support, and Sonny Danani is our senior collaborator and co-investigator as well. So to discuss our presentation today, we divided that into different steps to follow, just to make it easier to understand the process that we use it for developing our own research program. So the first one was define goals, the second team assembling, then study plan, engaging the target audience, funding and resources, project management, and knowledge translation. And now we are going to go through each of those steps for you. So the first thing, of course, in any research, you need to define what are your goals. So the first thing you need to do is to have very clear problem statement. So what is the problem you're looking at? Why is that important? And just make sure a lot of times we are personally invested in a certain topic, and that's truly important for us, but it doesn't mean it's really important for the healthcare setting. So we really need to make sure we're getting a topic that has relevance. And now, so that may seem silly what I'm going to say now, but that's from my experience, a step that a lot of researchers ended up missing throughout the process, is to identify if your topic is really a gap in the existing literature. So you really need to do your homework and do an extensive and thorough search in the existing literature to make sure you're not doing something that's actually duplicated. So it doesn't mean your research topic it needs to be totally unique, that nobody has never investigated that, but you need to make sure you are differentiating your research from the existing ones. And also it's important to know who is going to benefit from your research, because once you know who is the target population that will benefit from the type of research you are conducting, that will make it easier for you to find partners and even funders for that work. So once you have your problem statement very clear and aligned, the other thing you wanted to do is make sure you have goals that are SMART. So when we talk about goals that are SMART, we mean goals that are specific, especially because in large scale research programs, as it's the case of national research program, it's very easy to go too broad. So we want to make sure you have a goal that's specific enough to people know exactly what you are trying to achieve. And also how you're going to measure that. So if you're going to do a certain intervention, how you're going to measure the success of your research plan. And also you wanted to have a goal that's achievable, because a lot of times I may tell you guys, I wanted to develop a research program to improve organization in Canada. Okay, so I do have a goal, but is that really achievable? Probably not, because it's too broad. So I need something more specific. So I will be looking at what part of the process. So it is consent rate, it is the care for the donor. So all of those steps I need to follow to make sure I have something that can be actually achievable and it is relevant. So it is relevant for stakeholders, for the community, and for the healthcare system. And lastly, you also want to make sure that the goal you have, it's something that you can achieve with the time you have. So for larger research projects, usually you can take anything from 2 to 10 years to complete. So if you're looking for a project to do during a master's degree or a PhD, very likely a large scale program is not going to be the best option. So you wanted to see how long you would take to achieve that plan, and if you actually have the time commitment to dedicate towards that plan. So once you have very well the limitation, in our case, what we did was to do the team assembling process. And we do consider that one of the most critical steps of developing a research program that has high chances of success. So there are different steps you can use for the team building process, but we brought here one that we found very interesting, which is the integrated theoretical model for building effective teams. So in that specific study, Daly et al., they did a thorough investigation of the existing literature to come up with a series of steps that you can follow to make sure you are elaborating a team that it is effective to address the goals of your research and where you can have collaboration and communication. So in the different steps that they give in this framework, the first step, it is to establish the team building philosophy. So based on the goals that the team have, what is the philosophical approach that you're planning to use? Then you have the selection criteria. So what exactly I'm looking for? Who are the person that I need to have in that research to support me? And it is important when you think about that, it's not only about methodology, because of course, if I'm planning to do an RCT design and I have never done one of this type before, I definitely wanted to have someone with extensive expertise in that area to support me. But also there are a lot of things that go beyond methodological approaches. So for example, if I want to do a national research that involves a lot of communication with various organ donation organizations in Canada, I need to have someone who can help me building that network. So it's a lot of different sets of skills that you can be looking for. Then we have the team development theory, which involves forming, storming, norming, performing, and assuming. And then we have the theoretical constructs and its effect. So that's pretty much the charter and charter theory, which it is the overall assignment. So who is going to do what in that team? We have the change theory, which it is what are those people's experience and what are the activities that I have to perform. And I have the performance theory, which it is the relationship between the performance that we're having and the actual effectiveness of that team. And the last one would be the relationship theory. So would be the process of establishing relationship with others among the team. So we don't want it to have only a team that has the skills, but you wanted to have a team that can work together, that has good communication process, that you guys can collaborate and grow together. So this is pretty much a highlight of the steps of this framework, as well as other existing frameworks for building effective teams. So first of all, identify the needs you have. So that can be research needs, personal needs, anything that you are going to need to develop that project, what kind of skills you are looking for, and also when you are communicating with those participants, you need to make sure everything is made in a clear process, in a way everyone has a clarity of what are the expectations for them. And this is even one of examples. So for example, in the BRIC study, we have a document where we have a list of everyone who is involved in the project. What are the levels of engagement we need for them? What are the activities that we expect them to engage with? And what is their role in the research? So for example, those examples here we put patient partners. So what we expect from those patient partners. And especially because when you were talking about research, a lot of times participation in research is not paid. So of course, if you have a research assistant, research coordinator, you're going to pay for those people. But for people to develop the research with you, to be your collaborators, usually people do that in order to collaborate, to have more publications, to have authorship. So it's really important to establish those. So, okay, I need your support here to develop such and such a strategy. And if you can go through those and you fill the authorship criteria, you are going to be an author in the papers, and that's very likely the order of authorship we're going to get. So just to make sure people are clear. and they can be engaged throughout the process. And this document, it is a live document that we always use. And that's very important to make sure people actually have the time to commit with your research. Because a lot of times you are inviting people to your research, they are saying yes for you, but they are also saying yes, like for a lot of people. And then gets to a point that they are not actually collaborating. So you can use that document to send for the team, and hey guys, that's the document they have. I just want to make sure everyone is following through the plan that we have previously established. If someone does not have the time to commit with that research anymore, that's fine. Just let me know so we can get another person to keep the work going. So once you have your goals established and you have the key people that you know are going to be part of your team, and just remember, the team building is an ongoing process. So you don't need to have everyone at board at once. You can keep building your team as you go through the process, because more needs are going to develop as the research starts to be implemented. So that's truly a constructive and ongoing process. And the next step you have to stop to think about is how you're going to develop the plan for the research you're planning to implement. So of course, you want a research that's focusing the objectives you have. So you want to make sure you have methods that are actually going to help you achieving the goals you had at the beginning. And you wanted to have a strategic planning process, and you want to stick to that. So here's the example on how we develop the design of our research program. So what we have done, and for us, based on our own experience, was extremely helpful. And since then, we are doing that pretty much in other projects that we have been working with. It is to really break down your research, especially when you are working with a large research. At the beginning, it may seem like it is just so much that you can get overwhelmed. You're not sure if you're going to get enough funding for that, if you can have the deliverables for the funders that you get. So really, when you break the project into different phases, that helps you to manage the project, to find fundings, and to make sure you are always progressing. So in the case of the Break Research Program, what we have initially done, we developed 3 different phases, where the first phase was a scope and review of the literature. The second phase is a mixed method study that has been implemented across Canada in all Canadian provinces who have an organ donation organization. And then the third phase is an interventional study. So for us, that really helped, because we could first of all focus on the scope and review we had to conduct that. Then we could re-engage with people and develop the phase 2 and start an implementation process. So that really gives you clear divisions and makes it easier as well to get funding. Because if you have a large research project, you may need over $300,000, and that may be very difficult to get at once. But if you are going to start with a scope and review, maybe just like $30,000 is going to be enough for you to conduct that. So it gets easier to start the process. And this is a couple of things that sometimes when you are planning a study, we just don't think too much about, and that can be a lot of time consuming later on. So regardless of the research you are planning to conduct, you need to make sure you are aware of our regulatory and ethical legislation, particularly regarding research ethical boards approvals that you're going to need. Because if you are doing a large scale project or a national project, you are going to need to have more than only one REB submission process. And those submissions can take a lot of time. So for example, in our case, we had the CHIO, which is the organization we are affiliated with. We had their approval, but once we went to the organ donation organizations, we need to have a lot of other organizations who requested for the REB process. And those processes takes time. Like if you have ever done an REB submission, you know, it can take like months, because a lot of going back and forth with them. So just make sure you know what type of submission process and ethical legislation you are going to come across in your research, so you can anticipate that in your timeline, because it may take over a year to be able to get all the ethical study needs, and that's going to impact the funding that you have received, the development of the research, and the deliverables. So just be aware of those issues beforehand so you can be prepared. This is another step that we deem to be very crucial, which it is engaging with the target audience. So in the Berkeley Research Program, we use what we call a participatory research approach. And there are several types of frameworks that you can actually use to develop a participatory approach. Sorry. And for our research specifically, we use an approach that allows the utilization and implementation of research products that have a meaningful and translational impact on the lives of the engaged social group, community, or individuals. So it is very important to make sure you're engaging those people, not only at the end of the research, but since the very early stages. So once you develop your research plan, you can engage with the community to receive feedback. So in our experience, and again, I'm sorry, but I'm bringing a lot from what we have done and have worked for us. So we have engaged with the community. So once we have developed the entire plan for the national, the actual part of the research that was a national approach, we had a meeting with key stakeholders, which was supported by Canadian Blood Services, where we showed for them all the results from the initial phase, which was the scope review, and we presented what we were planning to do. So, okay, this is what we're planning to do, this is why we're planning to do, and these are the measures that we're planning to use. And then we asked for their feedback, and it was so valuable. Like they brought a lot of things that we didn't even think about. So for example, we were looking for work-related issues and what could be impacting those. And one of the ideas they gave to us was, okay, maybe you want to also measure for alcohol and substance use and abuse, because that may also impact the instance of those issues and coping strategies. And we're like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. We didn't think about that before. As well as you can ask for them. So looking for that type of research I'm showing for you, what do you anticipate to be a barrier? So what do you think may prevent us to be successful in the development of this study? And once they tell you the things that came to their mind, you can ask, okay, so what can I do to have tackled those issues so I can have a more successful response rate? And all of those experiences, they are extremely important to really make sure you are developing, because even though we are the researchers in the top front, we are really doing research in collaboration. So there's no research that can be done alone by one person. So it's really a team, and the more you engage with the target audience, the best the outcomes are going to be. And it's also important to understand that when you are working with a participatory approach, communication is not one way. So it's not me only all the time going to my target audience, my stakeholders, my collaborators, and say, so this is what we're going to do, this is what we're planning, this is this. You also need to be open to listening back. So what they have to say for you, how they can contribute to your research. Of course, a lot of times they may say things that actually go beyond the scope of your study, and that's fine as well. But then you can use communication, and you can just go through those aspects and see why that can be a good option or why cannot be a good option. But just make sure you are not keeping communication only one way, especially when you have a multi-phased process, because you went for them, like for the participants, to ask their participation, and then you just disappear, you never went back, and then you have the upcoming phase of your study, so you go back to ask for more data. Do you think they're going to participate? Very unlikely, right? So really make sure you are updating those people and you are having a two-way communication. So the next step to discuss, and that probably is the one you guys are more familiar with, it is related to funding and resource. So we know large scale projects can be very expensive. So it's very important to start planning the fundings that we're going to apply as soon as you can. So the first thing you need to work, of course, in your budget, how much you want to need for that. And again, I would go back and try to break down the project into smaller projects so that will make easier for you to try to find fundings, because the funding for one phase is going to be smaller than the entire project. And also identify what are the existing opportunities. So who has funded that type of work before, who could be interested in that type of work, and just to start, even if it is small. And a lot of times we come across with some applications that we look at and we are like, we're not going to get that funding. Like, I'm pretty sure we're not going to be able to receive that funding. But if we do have the time to commit, we just go ahead and do the application anyway, especially because every application that you do, even though you are not successful on the grant receiving, but you are learning from that, because every time they do provide extensive feedback. So you can get that feedback, you can improve your proposal, and you can try again in another opportunity. So just if you have the opportunity to write grants, just go ahead and do. So as you can see, just are just a couple of examples, but we have applied for much more than that in the last 2 years. So it's just a process of keeping trying and learning that you should not be frustrated once you don't get the money. You just should use that for your own learning experience. And also, when you're looking for those opportunities, just go beyond the traditional. So most people go for government agents such as SHARC, CDTRP, because those are the largest organizations in Canada. But you can also look funding in other parts. So for example, private foundations, nonprofit organizations, industry partners, and whoever do you feel it aligns with your goals. You can go for them, ask if they have opportunities or if they are willing to partner. So all of those things always help, and especially just as an example. So for us, Canadian Blood Services has been a major support of that work. So Willa is trying to find who aligns with the goals of your research and going back from who is going to benefit from that. So the next step, it is project management. So as I mentioned at the beginning, developing a national research program involves a lot of different steps, so it's crucial for you to have a strong team to do a project management. And again, I know I have said that a couple of times, but communication is everything. So make sure everyone in your team has clear role, expectation, and establish communication protocols. So if we're working on that together, let's say we're going to meet every 2 weeks, just, to update in the progress, see how everyone is doing. And in that way, you can also keep people accountable because they have the meeting, they know they have to give updates, so they know they have to do the work they have to do. And also, I always say to be, especially because we are living in a virtual world where everything is meeting and meetings and meetings, but just try to be respectful of the time of people. So especially if you have different parts of the project going on at the same time, you can have subgroups to work. So you may have a once a month meeting with everyone to update everyone in the process. But if you feel someone is not needed in that meeting, you can just say, if you have the time, we are more than happy to have you join in the meeting, but your input's not required at this point. So just make sure you are respecting the time of people so they are not waste the time to be in a meeting that actually they would not need to be, especially because usually people working with research, they are all very busy. So we just want to make sure we use the time the best as we can. And always make sure you have someone to be responsible for the project timelines and to make sure we have all the resources. So in our case, we do have a project manager, which it is Ken, and I am the research coordinator. So we are all going together and talking with Vanessa, who is the lead of the project, to make sure we have the money, how much money we still have, what resource we need, what are the timelines, what are the deliverables that we have to make sure we have followed through the steps and we're not missing anything. We're not spending more money than we have. We're not having deliverables to give that we did not. So just to make sure everything is organized and everyone is accountable for their own part of the process. So now very briefly, just to discuss questions related to the knowledge translation, because that's something that has been increasing in discussion a lot in recent years, and especially like when you look for grant applications, how you're going to do knowledge translation to go beyond the traditional. So first of all, as many of you may be aware, so the gap in the knowledge translation currently can reach up to 17 years. So that means from you publishing a knowledge to have that incorporated into clinical practice, it may take 17 years. And all of those delays and implementation of existing knowledge in clinical practice leads to reduced patient outcomes and increased costs for the healthcare system. So therefore, it's really important to have those knowledge translation strategies to make sure you are disseminating the knowledge you are discovering within people who are interested in the process. And a lot of time we just think about knowledge translation as an end process. So, okay, once I finish my research, I'm going to disseminate through that, and that strategy. But that's mostly a mistake. We also need to have knowledge translation strategy throughout the entire process. So just a couple of examples. So if you are just to start working in a research, you can use presentation in conference as a knowledge translation strategy to show people what you are doing and maybe even find potential collaborators, as well as you wanted to keep the participants updated. So as I mentioned before, in the case of our study, we have different phases. So now we are finishing the analysis of phase 2. So we are working developing specific infographics because even before publishing the material, we wanted to share that with participants. We want to make sure they are aware of everything we're doing because it's not our research, it's a collaborative approach. So we are developing that together, and it's very important to keep them engaged in that process. And also for you to think, so, okay, who needs to know about my work? Very often we just think about clinicians and researchers and where we can find ways to disseminate for them. But it's also important to think about the public. So who are the people who can benefit from your research? So we were doing research for education for the general public regarding disease organization. You want to disseminate that with nurses and healthcare professionals? Yes, for sure. But you want to make sure also that the general public is aware of those. So where you're going to find those people, how you can disseminate strategies within them. And so when you are working with knowledge translation, have your plan and follow through that. So have your formal presentations, publications, handouts for knowledge users. As I mentioned, infographics is the one we are working as of now. Try to have a project website for your research, and it doesn't need to be a website that you created only for your research. It can be even hosted within another organization. So let's suppose you have an academic position, ask for the university to create a page for you so you can have all the information. In the case of our project, the project website is hosted within the Canadian Blood Services website, and make sure you have newsletters and you can update those in the website. So for the break study, at least once a year, but we try to do twice a year, we develop a newsletter and we update on the website. So people don't need to come to us to ask for updates. They can just go to the website. And also working meetings. So as I mentioned, working meetings is just an excellent dissemination strategy. I mentioned for you guys the first working meeting that we have done at the beginning of the project to ask for input. But just in February, we had, with the support of Canadian Blood Services, another working meeting where we could come with a group of OTDCs and managers from all organ donation organizations in Canada. And we presented all the findings that we had from the survey and qualitative interviews. And we told them, like, from what we heard from you, those are the priorities that we are planning to work. And then they could tell us, oh yeah, those are our priorities. Oh no, maybe you heard that, but that's not that important. Like, can we change for another thing? So you're really doing something, you are making sure you are doing research that's meaningful for the needs of the community. Because at the end of the day, it's not about what we wanted to do as a researchers, it's what this target population needs, what can be done to improve the healthcare outcomes in that area specifically. And I'm almost finishing, so just a couple of conclusions. So as I mentioned, creating and managing a national research program in healthcare is complex, but it can bring a lot of benefits for healthcare providers, patients, society, and even communities as a whole. And the key for success when we're talking about a large-scale project, it is really to have careful planning, effective project management, and strong communication skills. So you have a strong team working with you, and you are going to have your target population engaged in the project. So just make sure you have clear and respectful communication, because that's definitely, like, based on our own experience, was the key for the success. And I say success because in that national research we conducted, we could get almost 70% of all OTDCs in Canada to respond. So that's truly a huge number. And we do believe most of the success in response rates was due to those previous engagements we did with them. So they could truly understand what was the purpose of our research and how that was important for them. It's not only for us like, oh, we want to go there and we want to discover what's going on and then we're going to disappear. No, we really want to make sure they understood, like, we're going to take this information, but we're going to bring back for you. We are going to try to develop something to improve. So all of those relationships are key, especially when you're working with large research to make sure you can be accountable for the goals that you have developed at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So that's pretty much this. So I do have my email and the email from Vanessa over here. If you guys have any questions, and again, just to be very specific, that is not supposed to be a guideline for you guys to follow step by step. It's more kind of a guidance from what worked for us in that project. And we are using this same step-by-step in other projects we are developing, and it has been working well. So we just thought that perhaps that may be useful for you as well. At least we hope so. Thank you very much. And I'm not sure if anyone has any question, but if so, I'm also happy to respond to those.
Thank you, Amina, for that excellent presentation. I think it was very, very interesting. And yeah, it's open now for anyone who may have any questions. Please feel free to raise your hand on Zoom. I can also start as you know, I think yeah, you went through, I guess, a very good description of all these different aspects, I guess, of project management and setting different goals and things. And I just have a question. How would you recommend facing setbacks in your when they arise in your project? I guess in our research projects, you can go through different things, and you try to plan as best as you can, but sometimes issues arise, and how would you recommend, I guess, facing those?
Yeah, absolutely. So we also were faced with a couple of those in our project as well, because it doesn't matter how good planning you have, life just happened. Like COVID was an example that was like for researchers, like was a nightmare, because a lot of research we're planning was going to be face-to-face, and then we could not conduct those anymore. So usually what we do is brainstorming within our team. So, okay, why we are being pushed back on that? So what is the problem we have and how we can solve that? And if we cannot, so as was the case of the COVID, so you cannot have non-interaction face-to-face, okay? So what are the existing alternatives that we can use that will keep us updated in the progress? So a lot of times you may have a lot of planning, but you just need to change as you go through the process. So you may decide that you wanted to do one phase and then phase 2 and then phase 3. But then you could complete phase 1, phase 2 is not possible anymore. You need to jump for phase 3. And, you just need to adjust depending truly on what are the issues you are facing and what are the potential alternatives. And just make sure you are keeping, especially if you're leading the project, keeping everyone engaged. So because it's very easy when everything starts going bad, people get very, frustrated, and they are not as engaged anymore because they just feel that's not going to work. So just make sure you are okay, guys. We do have that problem, but we will work through that. We have that and that potential alternatives. Anyone else has anything that you think may work? And just try to brainstorm within your team. I think that's the best strategy. But there is no way to avoid those.
There's no way, but that is I think a huge one. Yeah, trying to incorporate the whole team, and I guess all of us, I guess, coming together. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I think Stephanie has a question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Amina, for our presentation. Very interesting. As part of your knowledge mobilization, knowledge translation plan, do you recommend having a presence on social media? Like, have you seen some good things coming up from people having like updates or maybe debunking some information?
Yeah, that's a trick part. So We know we have been using a lot of social medias and networks for dissemination strategies, but for example, if you wanted to disseminate the finds within people who participated in the study, you just need to make sure you are following all the ethical procedures, because for a lot of ethical procedures, they ask for you to not disseminate nothing into social media that's related to results from the research. And another thing that unfortunately we need to be aware of is that even if it is for the generic population and you wanted to disseminate, let's suppose, an infographic with key aspects of your findings, just make sure you are leaving your findings susceptible to plagiarism, because like you are putting that information out there for everyone. So if you did not publish that yet, I would definitely not share. But if I finished the research and I wanted to disseminate the information across the community, not only with my participants, but across the organ and tissue donation community. So I think social medias are an excellent work, because you just post in there, you can ask CDTRP to post in there, and then everyone is going to share, and then so if it is something that can be accessed for everyone, absolutely, or for recruitment process, absolutely. But to share findings, I would be very careful just to make sure you have published that before and you are not disseminating anything that can contain sensitive information. Especially in qualitative research, it's very easy to have sensitive information because we use a lot of quotes, right? So sometimes we want to like a strong quote to grant people, and then someone may look like, oh my gosh, that was Stephanie. I remember she told me that history. So, you know, and that
and REB are usually very strict on this also for ethic, but interesting. So more into like finished research, then you can use this as
our recruitment process. And for both of them, just make sure you add that in the protocol for the REB, because REB needs to approve. Especially the recruitment process, sometimes we forget, but RB needs to approve, even like the communication, the email task, or the poster you're going to use need to be approved by them as well.
Oh, that is a good point. Thank you, Amina.
Yeah.
I have another question, if I may. So you talked about the application process for grants, or I guess, or applying to different grants to just try to get as much funding as you can, I guess. And so is there any advice that you can give based on the feedback that you've received? Like, is there anything that stands out to you in terms of what you would suggest to us?
Yes. So I think I would have mainly two things about feedbacks. You just need to see a lot of times also may happen that the person who did review your proposal did not. I always like to say there is no like only one correct option to conduct research. You may have one research question that can be responded in different ways, and you choose one, and that's fine. And you need to stick with the path you've chosen because of your reasons. But the person who is reviewing that may not agree, and they may give for you extensive feedback saying why what you were doing is wrong, but you know the rationale you use that. So you know the rationale you have is the correct one. So you don't need to accept those feedback. Like you should review all of them, but do not take that for you if you don't feel this feedback is applicable to you. And the other thing is, if you're doing an application, try to, if you have a space to attach documents, try to put the more information you can. So if you have the instruments, attach them. If you have the REB approval, add those. If you have the interview guide for qualitative interviews, add those. If you have publishing in the area before, and that's a continuing work, add those, because all of that helps a lot, especially like sometimes I get grants to review, and only 3 pages is just so little for you to understand what this person is trying to do. But if this person has a space for attachments and puts a lot of information, you can see they can prepare. Like, okay, so this person did not write this grant like from last week to this one, like she's prepared, like they have all the information, they have all the documents, like the research is ready to go. It's not like if they are approved that they're going to start working the data collection, instruments, and everything else. So really trying to have those and add those as attachment, it's really helpful. And make sure you state how unique your work it is and if it is feasible, because this is a feedback we received a lot of times as well. This is such a great project, we just don't think it is feasible. So make sure you are proving it is feasible. So why do you think that's feasible? And why do you think your research team has the skill to develop and implement the research project? Because those funders, they are afraid of giving money for things that are not going to move forward, right? So we need to prove that for them.
Yep, no, that actually is a great point for sure. Yep. Do we have any more questions? Maybe from anyone online and in the chat by any chance? Okay. Well, I guess if there's there's no more questions, then thank you for everyone for participating today, and Amina, on behalf of the CDTRP, thank you again for presenting. If anyone has additional questions, comments, or suggestions, in terms of topics or speakers, contact Erica Croft at Croft@cdtrp.ca. And yeah, thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.